Okay. So today we are thrilled to have Dr. Brian Yearwood here. He's served as a superintendent of Columbia Public Schools for 2 years now. He's got a 30-year career so far. He's been focused on understanding how scholars learn and providing opportunities through an educational framework that meets the needs of scholars and staff. I didn't know a lot of this. He's originally from Trinidad and Tobago and attended New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico, which is fun, on a tennis scholarship. He also received a tennis scholarship to Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas, where he earned a Bachelor of Science, a Master of Educational Administration, and a doctorate in educational leadership. Before he came to Columbia, he taught physics and chemistry to high school students in a pre-engineering program at Texas Tech. He also served as an adjunct professor at Lubbock Christian University and assistant superintendent for academics and accountability and chief operations officer at Manor Independent School District. And that's in Manor, Texas, M-A-N-O-R, Manor, new one by me. Additionally, he held several leadership positions in several Texas school districts. He's married to Tina and has 2 kids, and some of his interests and hobbies include working on cars, building things, and flying single-engine airplanes, which is pretty fun. So we're thrilled to have him here, and with that, I will hand proceedings over to Dr. Yearwood. We're interested to hear what he has to say.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you this afternoon, and I will definitely the airplane one was one that I was challenged to get into. It was not something I quickly volunteered to. I was challenged by my teacher as I was bringing a program in, and he had his license. I'm one long distance flight away from getting my pilot's license. That's one long distance flight, but I haven't taken that yet. Anyway, thank you for having me. And today I'm going to speak to you about the state of Columbia Public Schools. As we know, the quality of our community is determined by the schools, and the quality of our schools is determined by our community. So when our schools do well, our community does well. And when our community does well, our schools do well. So I call it more of a symbiotic relationship, and it requires us to be partners in education for all scholars by partnering with our community. So in this presentation today, I'll be discussing 2 main points. The first is our continuous school improvement plan, which is our strategic plan, and this is a 5-year plan. And the other is our annual performance report. How are we doing as a school district compared to other school districts, and what does the state say about the state of academics here in Columbia Public Schools? This is a summary of some of the more, I call it essential data, elements collected on all schools in Missouri. As you see and hear the information in this presentation, I hope that you will see very clearly where we can help each other to make Columbia a model community and its schools to be the best in the state. So I will start sharing my screen. Let's make sure I can get this done. Shared screen. Okay. Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint?
Yes, that looks fine.
Looks fine. Okay, excellent. What you should be seeing here, of course, our theme is putting scholars first. And remember, I use the term scholars because of the potential that we must believe every single student has, the ability to grow. As educators, we believe that our students in front of us have the capability of achieving, and we don't put lids or limits on where they can go, but we have that belief. And we put our scholars first by looking at their growth, by bringing in innovative practices, and of course, by achievement. Very, very important. Today, as I speak to you about the state of Columbia Public Schools, the quality of the community, as I said, determines or helps to drive where we are. So one part of you'll hear me talk about our continuous school improvement plan, the annual performance report, and just remember that although they're 2 separate documents, they must complement each other. So let's get started. Every school district has a vision and a mission and values. Our vision is to be the best school district in the state. We want to be the best. And what we do, how we get there, is by following our mission by providing an excellent education for all students. And of course, we value things like trust, integrity, collaboration is big, transparency, empathy, and grace. So in all things, we put scholars first. Every child is treated first as a scholar. Every decision focuses on scholars first, and every scholar must receive a quality educational experience. No matter what they come to us with, that's very important. So let's talk about our strategic plan for just a minute. Our strategic plan has to be reviewed every 5 years. We just reviewed it. We ended our 5th year just last year, and we worked on bringing a new strategic plan in back in December. The board approved it, and that should carry us through for the next 5 years. In the strategic plan, it was developed with collaboration with teachers, with families, with our community, and it includes, if you look at the strategic plan, it includes goals, action steps. It's geared towards improving in key areas. Now, these goals that are in our strategic plan are in line with state expectations, as well as local needs identified by, again, our teachers, administrators, families, and so on in our community. One thing I'd like to share with you today is that historically, our strategic plan has been a model for other districts. The district, also, we have agreed to be a part of a pilot group with DESE, which is our overarching or state organization. And it's a good thing because it allows us to work through new requirements for our new state standards. The state revises our standards and expectations. And this year is a 6th iteration, 6th change of these standards. And the expectation is that we adhere to the new standards provided for us by DESE, and it must be reflected in our strategic plan. So let's look at this some more. As we developed our strategic plan, we looked at input and feedback. We had what is called World Cafes. This is where we brought our community together, our at-large community. I remember we had this on October 6th. We probably had quite a few members. These are some of the pictures that were there during that collaboration time. And we received ideas. We asked the community, what would you like to see us do better? What would you like to see us bring into the schools as we look at ways to improve? We also did climate surveys. We had thought exchanges. We held what you call mini World Cafes. This is where we brought in smaller groups such as administrators. We brought in teachers. We brought in parents, and then we brought in scholars so that we can hear more intimately from the smaller groups, what would you like to see us do better in Columbia? Now, because of that, there were several things that came up for our strategic plan. And based upon this overall feedback from the World Cafes, the climate surveys, the thought exchanges, the key areas identified are listed here for you. And this includes, of course, employee retention. Discipline was a very big one. Achievement, also huge. And then the climate of our school. How can we improve upon that? As we look at our surveys, remember I mentioned that we sent surveys out. Several things bubbled up from these surveys. The climate and survey, although one element to helping us develop our CSIP, allowed us to solicit feedback from scholars, parents, and employees. And the climate survey included specific questions from DESE, because DESE, under their state accountability, says we must ask specific questions. They gave that to us. So we did that, and the results that we saw coming forth from this identified areas of success and areas of challenge for our school. For example, the results show that our scholars feel welcome and cared for at schools. Also, our parents also reported that they feel that our teachers and staff genuinely care about their scholars. Employees were part of this, and the employees felt that everyone is working hard to help scholars succeed. All of this from our survey. The challenge areas were identified as well, and I mentioned those earlier. Employees are concerned about substitute fill rates and employee retention. That was huge because I remember at one point we had openings for about 30 substitutes, but because of our low unemployment rate here in Columbia, we just couldn't find the bodies to want to come to work. Parents and employees were both concerned about student discipline. Coming back from COVID, I guess our scholars spent a lot of time at home in their own environment. We saw an increase in student disruptions, and we are working on that. It's still a problem that we must deal with. All of the elements of this survey, World Cafes and Thought Exchanges and so on, in addition to other resources where we evaluated and we looked at data, were actually used to develop our strategic plan. So as we look at our plan, it had to compare to our annual performance report. Remember, the annual performance report now is generated by the state. We generate our strategic plan. The state generates our annual performance report based upon a certain formula. This annual performance report also determines the accreditation levels for school districts. It combines elements from different data sources, including things like academic achievement. It looks at attendance, it looks at graduation rate, looks at post-secondary preparation and outcomes, and so on. This year in particular, DESE created a new set of standards, a new set of criteria called MSIP 6. So this is a sixth change of the standards that schools are required to meet to maintain their accreditation. One thing that we must note, or DESE was very clear about, is that we should not compare this performance report to previous year's performance report because they changed the criteria. The contents of this annual performance report, remember, comes from data back in 2021-22. We're in 22-23, so we'll have another set of data points at the end of this year. So this is last year's data coming right off of COVID. It really reflects impact due to the pandemic. And actually, as we looked at the data, we saw a disproportionate impact on some groups of scholars. It separates scoring for achievement and growth. And it allows us to look at performance. It allows us to look at continuous improvement, which is growth. This is the first year for this version of the annual performance report. So again, DESE says we're not going to use this data this year to lower anyone's classification. So, and we'll see why in just a minute. And remember, this is among many data points that we use ourselves in determining the growth of our scholars. Let's take a look at why DESE stipulated they weren't going to change accreditation. If you look at this data in blue, we have the annual performance report and the number of schools that fell into these categories. So starting from left to right, we notice that the schools that would be considered unaccredited, in 2018, there were 3. This past year, there were 2. But I want you to go over to the far right side, and this is very, very telling of the changes in criteria. In 2018, there were 320 schools that were performing at the top level, the optimal level, right? Schools of excellence. This year in green, 2022, there were 4. But if you look right next to it, in 2018, there were 219 schools performing at, we call it the proficient level. This year, 435. So the numbers have dropped from the 95% down to the 70 to 94.9%. That's because the criteria has changed, and let's say it has become a little more difficult to maintain that level, that high level that we saw before. And let's keep going for a minute. Let's explain this more. So remember I said that as they calculated, as we looked at these calculations, they looked at performance and they looked at growth. We call that continuous improvement. Very, very important. Under performance, things that were looked at were achievement status, achievement growth, and this all had to do with looking at all students, which was 14%, and then looking at the subgroups, or white, or black, or Asian, Pacific Islanders, and so on, accounted for 10%. And then the growth of these scholars was also calculated. So 24% of that 70 went to achievement, another 24 went to achievement growth. So you could say close to 48% had to do with student achievement, such as are they proficient in reading and math based upon the state tests. The other areas were things like success ready. This is where scholars were taking the ACT, SAT. There's a measure called the AccuPlacer, and this determines sort of what areas a scholar would be successful in at a community college and so on. Those were looked at under success ready. Then there was graduation rates. That accounted for 10%. And of course, did we follow up with our graduates once they left us? 2%. Under growth, do we have a plan for improving? 24%. We also looked at, are they success ready? And this one, this success ready basically was addressing, do our scholars have a plan for when they get into high school to be successful? Very important. And that accounted for 30% of the overall grade. So again, 70% performance, 30% more on growth. We'll keep it going. So as we look at growth, there were several areas that we have addressed in our strategic plan. Remember, the strategic plan was created and shared with our board in December, and we looked at different standards that we have across the district. We looked at items in our annual performance report. We did things like the culture and climate survey, and so on. We also looked at kindergarten, because there's now a kindergarten assessment that the state says we must give. And we looked at that data as we have administered all kindergarten assessments in the past, and so on. So as we look at the growth factors, I'll go down them. Individual career academic plan. This means every 8th grader must have an academic plan for success. We fell short on this one because the data was not submitted to DESE in a timely manner, and such we did not receive any points for this area. We have that taken care of this year. Attendance was a very big one. We get credit for scholars that are in attendance 90% of the time. Last year, 72% of our scholars were in attendance 90% of the time. Unfortunately, to receive any points, you must have at least 80% of your scholars in attendance 90% of the time. Right now, today, we're sitting at 79.2. So we are 0.8 percentage points off from receiving any points on our annual percentage report based on attendance. Next, our financial audit. This is completed every year in the fall. We receive points for that. And then or annual secretary of the board report must be submitted in a timely manner. This contains things like revenues, fund balances or debt, transportation data, and so on. And it must be submitted in a timely manner. We'll get points for that as well. So let's look at the actual report card. So remember, this is 30% of our grade. So as we look at this requirement here, we see that the possible points are listed in the middle column, and the amount of points earned are listed next to that. This is how Columbia scored. So as we go down the list, we see that we receive grades for our response to standards, we receive grades for climate surveys or kindergarten assessment. We did not receive any grades for our 8th graders filling out the data to show what they'll be doing in high school. That has since been taken care of. Our attendance, because it's so low, it's not approaching the 80%, we did not receive any points for that. Our career and technology expansion, we did not receive points for that this past year, but we will this year because we have added programs that will be reported this year. The rest of it we received full points for. The financial audit was great. The secretary reported her findings, and of course, it was done in a timely manner. So because we did not receive points, we earned 84.6% in our growth or continuous improvement. Now remember, this only accounts for 30% of our overall grade. I want to share with you a little bit about attendance. Remember, I said that we must be at 80% to receive some points. We must be at 90% to receive full points. And today, according to, well, this happened about 2 weeks ago, we were at 79.3% overall. If we get to 80, we'll be fine. The problem is we know that at the end of May, the last 2 weeks in May, we know what happens. Our scholars quit coming to school. They take vacations, things just fall apart. We've been tracking, I implemented this this past year, and we've been tracking overall attendance by school. Those in green are great. Those in yellow are making progress and are close. And those in red are the schools that need to improve. Attendance is not where it needs to be. So again, we'll continue working on that. Next, I want to talk about the 70%. This 70% is, again, has to do more with performance and achievement. So let's take a look at that. We see possible points here in the in the points possible column. Points earned. This is where Columbia fared, and the percentage of those points earned is also in the next column. And very importantly, we have what is called the MPI, which is a map performance indicator. This number is very, very important. So for example, you receive points based upon where you land on your MPI. So for example, in English language arts, we scored 379.3. To receive 50% of the points, we had to score within that range between 300 and 381. To receive 75% of the points, we needed to score between 382 and 399. So again, we are just 2.7 points away from getting 75% of our points. Now, that metric changes according to the subgroups, but we can see overall, we keep receiving 50% of the points in English language arts, in math, in science, and in social studies. I want to, and also in English language arts and so on, we see also the growth here. And if you notice, there's a difference. Although for performance, we're receiving 70% of the points. As we look at growth in English language arts, math, and so on, We receive more points because our scholars are growing, meaning they're going from an F to a D or D to a C and so on. So we are growing scholars. The problem with this, I'll stop here and get on for a minute, is that when our scholars take these state tests that we are judged by, they have no incentive to do well. Our scholars know this test to them means absolutely nothing. So there's some scholars that will say, I'm not coming to school during state testing. This is in the past. There's some scholars that say, I'm just going to bubble and see for everything. I'm not even going to try. There's some scholars that will sit there and don't even take the test. And that is a problem because we need more of our scholars taking this test more seriously. We have started changing that. I've implemented what I call progress measures, where we take micro assessments 5 times a year, and the scholars know where their data is, where their data lies, and they are tracking now whether or not they're making progress to actually doing better on MAP. What we have noticed is, one, our scholars are taking assessments more seriously. We are seeing greater participation rates. Last year, when this was done, we were seeing participation, 50% of our scholars participating, 60%. Right now, we're seeing 90% of our scholars participating in these assessments. Our teachers knew this meant nothing to our scholars. So now we're seeing teachers having a greater sense of urgency and looking at data. Just yesterday, I was visiting with a principal who says, Dr. Yearwood, before all of this, we did not look at our data. And I knew that because coming in, I would say, tell me about 3rd grade reading. Tell me about 5th grade math. Our scholars growing and learning. And I couldn't get a straight answer. Now we've put mechanisms in place to start measuring the progress of our scholars as they move throughout the school year. So what we're hoping to see is that there's an increase in performance rates. And our initial data that has come back from our mini assessments is showing, yes, we are surpassing where we were in our state test last year. And again, I know for the sake of time, I don't want to go too far because I want to leave time for questions and answers. So let's look at our data. As you look at our data, we compared our state tests, the MAP tests, in English language arts, math, science, and social studies, and we compared 2021 to 2022. Again, in 21, 44% of our scholars were either at proficient or at mastery levels. This past year, 22, 43%, dipped to some. In 21, in math, 31. This year, there's an improvement. And math has been a problem, not just here in Colombia, but it's a national problem because of the years of COVID and the time that our scholars spent out of school. We are seeing this as a national trend, and we're looking at ways we can mitigate this in Colombia. In science, 38% to 40%, and in social studies, 41 to 36. I must say that although in English language arts we took a dip, we still scored in the top 20% of schools in Missouri. So our English language arts department, although low, we're still in the upper end as far as our comparisons to school groups in Missouri. Let's look at success ready, very important. This is where we looked at, I mentioned before, ACT, SAT, and so on. And this is the point spread that we received. We received half of the points in areas such as the AccuPlacer, the ASVAB, which determines military readiness and so on. And in advanced credit, we received all of the points. So again, we're working on this to improve even our assessment data. Now, I want to talk about graduation rates for just a minute. Let's go to graduation rates. I will jump to last year's graduation rates as we looked at our percentages, and we see sort of the numbers here. Typically, our graduation rate fell at 89.7%. To get all points, we must be at 92%. To get some points, we must be at 90, we must be at 90%. That's our goal. We have made our strategic plan that says we will improve in our attendance every single year, and that's part of our own strategic plan. So we expect this number to go up. Next, graduate follow-up. Remember, this was 2% of our scores. So we have tracked our graduates, and this represents the numbers of our graduates and where we've tracked them to. So we see 51% of our graduates end up in a 4-year college, 18% in a 2-year college, 13% are employed, 1.6% going to military, 1% in training programs, and so on. And there's some others on the right side outside of the red box that we have an idea where they are, but we don't have full data on them as we are tracking them. But we keep looking to see where they end up. Let's talk about where we landed as a school district. So in our performance, we earned 82 points, which put us at 64.1%, which is 70% of our grade. In growth or continuous improvement, we were at 84.6%, but it only accounts for 30% of our grade. So when we did the calculation, we landed right at 70%, which means that we are accredited. But remember, the accreditation, since they made changes to standards, says this year, we're not going to change the accreditation level of anyone, but we wanted to know where we landed, and so they've put this data out. I do not expect us to be close to the bottom this school year because we know the new criteria and we have paid very close attention to it, and we've put things in place to address our deficiencies in the academic environment. In addition to that, we are looking at, or not only, let me go to the next slide, not only did we say that, the DESE say that they're not going to hold us accountable this for this past year, this year as well, 22-23, they're not going to hold us accountable. Next school year is when it becomes real. They will change our accreditation based upon where we land with our annual performance report. I do not anticipate us being even close to that 70. I expect us to rise because we're now looking at data. Our teachers are looking at data more intimately. Our schools looking at data. We have schools coming up and presenting to me and my cabinet now about their data. They're presenting now at board workshops about their data. Not only are they presenting their reading and their math data, they're also presenting what have they done well, what have they not done well, what are some of their needs, and things like that. So that way we can start addressing their deficiencies. And remember, we have not done this before. This is something that we have implemented this school year. So let's talk a little bit about some of the highlights here. Some of the positives that we saw are in advanced credit. We received all points in advanced credit. Continuous improvement, we scored fairly well, 84%. Growth in English language arts, being in the top 20% of the state, was good. From the surveys, our parents are generally happy with schools and their scholars, teachers. And of course, very, very important to us, our scholars feel welcome and cared for in our schools. The challenges, we must ensure that our individual career academic plans, to ensure that our scholars have a plan for high school, that data must be incorporated, and we have a plan in place. I was just checking on that this morning. There was one school that was at 80%, and we expect them to be at 100% in having their scholars fill out those plans. Math continues to be a bit elusive for us. And again, national phenomena. So we're looking at interventions, we're looking at curricula, we're looking to see what is it that's happening in math overall that's creating the problem. And then, of course, our overall achievement. The 70% is not acceptable. Even the data is not acceptable. We must rise and climb. And I think we'll get there because everyone's now more in tune with the data. Instead of saying it being, well, we wait till the state test. We're not going to wait till the state test at the end of the year. We're going to do micro assessments throughout the year. It's almost like, you know, going to the doctor for a checkup. We're going to do checkups throughout the year to ensure our scholars are growing. Big question, what can you do to help as a community member? And there's several things here. I always say, under being supportive of our schools, don't underestimate the importance of kindness and positive reinforcement. There are times that sometimes a school needs to hear something positive. Scholars need to hear something positive. It just uplifts everyone. Be a champion of learning in CPS. What does that mean? Encourage scholars to engage in their learning. Encourage teachers and employees who work incredibly hard every day to continue to put scholars first. Be an encourager. Get them to school. If a scholar is missing a day of school, it's actually 3 days of instruction they're missing. They're missing the catch-up, they're missing the current practice, and they're missing what they'll be doing the next day. So again, it's quite a bit. We need our community to rally around us, to look at ways they can perhaps help schools with getting our scholars motivated to come to school. As I was presenting this, I have a teacher advisory group for elementary and one for secondary. I remember the elementary teacher group, teachers were telling me, Dr. Yearwood, we call our scholars that are late, those that don't come. And basically some of the parents are saying, I'm sorry, my child is not going to be at school on time ever. They're going to be at school at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. And we don't have a mechanism in place to really hold that parent accountable. In Texas, we have compulsory attendance laws, which means that our scholars are expected to be in place 90% of the time. If not, they run the chance of losing their credits. In addition to that, in Texas, schools are allowed to take parents to court because they're in violation of our mandatory attendance laws. And I have actually seen parents fined, and some actually have served some jail time because they're refusing to take their scholars to school. We know that I'm not saying we need that in Missouri. I'm not advocating for that. But what I'm saying is we need to tighten up on our attendance laws, because right now, nothing happens. If a scholar misses school, if there's a referral to the justice system, nothing is happening. They're overwhelmed. There's nothing that really gives us any teeth on holding parents accountable for getting their scholars to school. So again, that's something at some point, hopefully through some form of, I don't know, that needs to be addressed. Because it's unfair for a parent to be at home asleep and just flatly say, I'm not bringing the scholar to school. Okay. The next one, consider being a mentor to a scholar in need. And we have some fantastic partnerships with organizations that provide mentors for scholars. One of the largest is Big Brothers Big Sisters, which actually provides a school-based mentor for hundreds of our CPS scholars. And there's a waiting list for additional mentors if an organization decides that's something they'd like to do. The last one, be engaged and active in our schools and with our scholars. We're encouraging our businesses, different organizations to go through our Partners in Education program, to go through Junior Achievement, to encourage volunteering to participate in special events or programs, or the many opportunities that we have. And you can actually find out more about this through our Community Relations Office. We do have a campaign going called the You Matter campaign. And this is where we are calling out our scholars. We have posters up so that our scholars know we want them in school, that they matter to us. We want them in our school doors and not at home. So overall, in a nutshell, this is where we are formed with our annual performance report. This is what we have done with our strategic plan. And I think the future is bright. I see improvements coming because we are paying closer attention to our data than we have ever done in the past. And our data is not just reflective of where we are after the pandemic. Our data is reflected of a trend that has been happening within our schools. So we will get better, and we will realize our vision to be the best in the state, because that belief, that support from our community, that caring that we have from our community, we will harness that to drive us forward to that level of excellence. So at this time, I know I said a lot. I will stop and entertain any questions you may have. And I'll need some help.
Yep. Do you need me to kick you out here of the sharing?
Yes.
I think I can.
Yes, I was going to try to kick myself. Oh, stop sharing. I can do it.
Oh, there you go. Cool. Yeah, you got it faster than I did. Okay. I saw one question in the chat, so let's go ahead and deal with that before I lose track of it. Alan Mary Jo asked, 17 days seems like a lot of missed time. Do you have a breakdown of some of the reasons why students are missing school? Are there trends and why people are not showing up?
Yes, there's a combination. Something that we have landed on is we have an increasing number of out-of-school suspension days that are happening. I'll be honest with you. What we've discovered is there's a small population, a small group. 5% of our population is accounting for the majority of our discipline. So every time they have had to be put out of school, it counts as an attendance against us. And we've seen a tremendous rise in out-of-school suspensions with behaviors that we have not seen before within our schools. That's one. The other one is raising the awareness of our parents and community about the importance of attending school. What we're hoping to do is develop a culture of going to school and being on time, because we know that if a scholar understands, I have to be on time to school, this is important, that also affects their work ethic. Because what we've seen is, if I don't care about being on time to school, and that's what I've gotten away with, why am I going to care about being on time to work? So we have to change that mindset along the way. But yes, so discipline, and of course, there's that apathy about being in school. We're also looking at that. Remember, this is the first year we've actually started tracking the data. There was no data tracking before. And we are now going to drill it down to the teacher level to see which classrooms or scholars are not attending. And perhaps maybe it might be they don't feel welcome. They don't feel they're at home. And then I'm also working on looking at how can we look at maybe more theme schools so that schools can be more attractive to scholars. By that, I mean, there are scholars who have a musical talent, who have a gift, who can sing, who can play a musical instrument. Why can't we have more schools like that? We have scholars that love science. Why can't we have more STEAM schools or schools that emphasize science? We have scholars that love to work on projects. We can look at project-based learning pieces. So again, we're looking now, this year, we will be investigating what themes can we bring into our schools that would allow the schools to be more attractive so the scholars would look forward to being there. So I'll stop there with that. Okay, I'm sorry, next.
I had a couple of questions about related to attendance, and then I see we've got 3 more hands up. One is just an observation. I know that we were having a lot of trouble with busing. And, you know, I know my son was late every single day to Hickman because the bus was late. And I'm sure that was counting against the attendance. And then on top of that, I know as a parent, I keep getting these notes like when they had the weird short schedule on Wednesday, he was counted absent in his 3rd hour class because he had signed in on some notebook, but it hadn't been recorded because something about the Career Center buses, blah, blah, blah. But I can tell you personally, at least 20 times this past school year, I've gotten a notice that he missed a class. And every single time that was false. And every single time I send an email to the attendance secretary back and said, no, Dante was in class. This was what was discussed. And I would CC the teacher, and the teacher 20 times replied back and said, yes, that was my mistake. He was in class. So I'm also wondering how many of these absences, it would have been 20 times for my kid, 20 missed classes. If every kid is getting counted absent 20 times a year, that might be part of it too. It might be record keeping.
Yeah, and 100%, because you're not the first parent that has shared that with
I'm
us, and we
sure.
share that with our attendance clerk. There are some errors that are happening that we're clearing up right now, because
Yeah.
for some reason we've actually had experiences where the scholars have gone on a field trip with the school and
Yeah.
they've been counted absent. So
Yep.
we have that taken care of. So you're right, we are working on our processes there. If the bus is causing a scholar to be late or on time, they should not be counted tardy, because it's not their fault. So again, I'm glad you're sharing that with me. I will go back to my team and make sure
Yep.
that if it's the fault of the bus, no, they can't be
Yeah.
counted absent, or they shouldn't be counted late. So
And
I will check that.
and hopefully those things are going to improve, because I know that they're having better luck staffing the buses, and then it's been fully funded again for the second time ever by the state legislature. So I'm hopeful that that is only going to help. And I hope you didn't see that as a real criticism. I was just
No, 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 no,
um,
no.
but then I, as a parent, am involved enough. I do take the time every single time to email the attendance secretary. But a parent that is not as on top of things as I am, has juggling more things, maybe doesn't have email, they're probably aren't going to take the time to push back on that. And so, yeah, I mean, it might just be almost in some cases really just a reporting error, and the students really are in class. So I'm hopeful, because
And
yeah, I was shocked just like everyone else when I heard 17 days.
yes,
That's a lot.
yes, yes. And actually, what is going to help as well is that we are now tracking the data. So when a school has 70% in the past, no big deal. They could count you absent, no big deal. But now that we're saying, hey, school, you're not meeting our threshold, what's going on? What gives? You may want to audit your data. You may want to check and
Yeah.
make it to where they work hard to ensure that they have scholars in school,
Mhm.
because one mistake is going to take their numbers down. So we're hoping that that will generate that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the past, it had nobody had been paying attention, so why it wasn't that big of a deal if there was slipperiness. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I would just talked and talked and talked, and there's so many hands up. Tillamas, I think you've been waiting the longest. Do you want to go first?
Indeed. First, thank you very much for coming before us today. We appreciate it. Even more, we appreciate your accepting the invitation to superintend the Columbia Public Schools. I have a question about COVID loss. Yesterday, May 11th, the Education Recovery Project, a joint Harvard-Stanford major project of 8,000 communities in 40 states, studying, at least they reported upon yesterday, grades 3 through 8, and found that during COVID, we have retarded the performance of average students 3 through 8 grade by a half year in mathematics, a third of a year in language arts, as the term goes. But worse than that, the variance is enormous, with places like St. Louis losing a year and a half in a math performance. Where does Columbia Public Schools fit in that, whether or not you're part of this project? Are we good or bad or in the middle? And what are we doing about it? Because the study recommended this is far too great to deserve anything less than a special approach for recovery.
So we weren't a part, at least we were not a part of that study. I would love to see that study. If there's a way you can send that to me, to my superintendent's email. I would love that. We are
It's
not
in the national press.
National press. Okay, I'll make a note of that, and this is a Harvard study. Okay. I must say that we are not in a good place in math. In math or reading, I'm not me. Let me talk about me. I'm not satisfied with where we are, to be honest. We have not broken, if you looked at that graph, we have not broken 50%, but we've not broken 50% proficiency in years in reading or math, even prior to COVID. That is unacceptable to me. So I am not happy with where we are. And so I'm putting things in place to start addressing that. I will be happier when we get to the 70 and the 75 and the 80 and even the 90%. And I think that we're capable of doing that. But people need to look at their data, look at what the data is telling them. And once they look at the data intimately, then they could move to intervention and remediation and things. That was not happening before. And as a matter of fact, I had tremendous pushback when I started, and I still do. I'm not very popular because I'm holding more people accountable. I brought in my psychometrician. He worked with me in Texas, and he actually is tracking not only growth, but he's got it broken down by teacher who's actually growing our scholars and who's not growing our scholars. And we discovered 26 teachers at our type of schools that have not grown our scholars. People don't want to hear that sort of data. But what we're doing, we're not trying to fire anyone. We're not trying to get anyone in trouble, but we are trying to find areas where we need to put professional development, where we need to grow our teachers. And I'll be honest, the pushback against me for looking at this data the way it is has been pretty tremendous, because people don't want to talk about that. So, but we are looking at that data, and we're putting things in place now to start growing our teachers, especially in those deficient areas. We've hired more instructional coaches this year than we have before. So yes, I'm not happy with our data. I'm not.
I think Marie had her hand up next in order. I could be wrong about that, but why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay. My question is going back to the absentee issue. I have heard that there is a great deal of churn in terms of students who move because of housing instability and insecurity, end up moving sometimes multiple times during a school year. And they may be missing school between leaving one school and then starting in another one, or during the move transition. Can you speak to how common that problem is, and maybe how you're trying to address that?
Yes, well, I don't have the exact number, but I know we have high mobility among our schools here in Columbia, but we have mechanisms in place that we bus scholars more than the state has asked us to. Normally they say 1 mile for elementary, 2 miles for secondary. No, 1 mile for secondary, 2 miles for elementary. We bus anyone between 2 and 3 miles. So we have increased our radius for busing our scholars in. And whenever there's a need for transportation, we move to action. As long as we know about it, we move to action. We have a very large, well, a pretty sizable group of homeless scholars. They family goes from home to home and so on. Once we know about them, we move to action to get them to school. Our mantra, and at least my philosophy, is that we should not accept a scholar not being in school as an excuse. We have to do whatever it takes to ensure that every scholar has transportation to and from school. So as long as we know about it, we will move to action. My team knows that as well. So again, it doesn't mean that we are not going to make a mistake or miss a scholar, but we shouldn't. And our attendance clerks should be tracking that. So let's say they move from Blue Ridge to, I don't know, to Shepherd. The record should follow. And if that scholar is not showing up, someone should be saying something about it to ensure that they're in school. So we actually are tracking the movement of scholars no matter where they go. It's a matter now of ensuring that that attendance person or clerk is feeding the information to where we can move and provide resources to get that scholar to school. And it's one that I will, now that you've raised that, I will be double checking on that as well. I'm making a note of that. Thank you.
Pam, I think you were next, and then we'll go to Alan, Mary Jo.
Okay. Dr. Yearwood, I would like to know the date of the groundbreaking for the next school.
Okay. We do not have that. We're still sort of in the planning stages. What threw us off, to be honest, is we budgeted about 20, we did Cedar and another school for about $25 million. When we did the budget and the cost of a new school, because of COVID and supply and demand, we were closer to 40-something million dollars. That took us by surprise. And that has sort of set us back in making sure that we deliver the school as promised, and making sure that we have the supplies to finish out the school. So we have not set anything. We're still in planning stages, and it has wreaked havoc with our budget.
Would you estimate it will be next year?
Not
Meaning,
I would be
2024?
surprised. I would anticipate sometime in 20, let's see, we're in 23, 24. I would say between 24 and 25. I wouldn't say next year. It'll be sometime 24, 25.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You know why I'm asking, because
yes.
I'm interested in the name of the school.
Yes. And there's a committee that will be going through that process, and I do understand. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Me. Dr. Yearwood, do you have a mandated suspension policy that you could describe to me?
Yes, we have a behavior plan that talks to fights, any form of violence. We talk to things like assaults that has happened. We talk to anyone that has significantly disrupted the educational environment. What we're investigating right now, so that we can start mitigating this absenteeism, is there are programs that allow the scholar from home to sit in the classroom from home during the suspension. So I forget, was it Massachusetts? There's a school district or a couple that have utilized that, and right now we are examining that. So that way, if we do have to suspend, place a scholar out of school, they can still be a part of the educational process, and they can still get the credit for attendance. I am against any form of violence in the school. Can't have that. I've instituted an emergency measure this year, got some pushback from it, but I said, if a scholar assaults an adult, a scholar assaults another student, or a scholar has their second or third fight that they initiated, I'm putting them online. Because in the past, they would have a fight, 4 or 5 days later, here they go back in class. We can't have that. So I know there was some pushback with that, but instead of just suspending them, I'm putting them online for the remainder of the semester to make sure they have supports and to preserve. And what I've heard from the high school principals, that's where we're focusing on, is it is working. As a matter of fact, it's not something that I don't like bragging about, but 2 young ladies were getting into it. And what one of them said was, yes, this is my first fight. This is her second fight. I'm going to push her to have a fight so she can go online and she no longer has to show up here. So that's some of the thinking that goes on there. But we must have schools where schools do what they're for, the education in reading, writing, math, science, social studies. Having schools where there's fights and all this nonsense, no, we're not going to have that, at least not under my watch. I'm sorry.
I think the online is a really great idea, and I appreciate it even for the middle school level. I'm asked this question because my students have come to me with some, my adult students with some real legitimate concerns about the use of suspension in the school system, and I just wondered what the policy was. Yeah. So I think some of the minority students have been a bit abused. So
yes, well, we've seen an escalation in the suspension, especially among our Black students. But I say this, over 75% of our scholars, over 75% have never been referred to the office for any reason. At Battle, Hickman, and so on, there's a small population, 5 to 10%, that are repeat offenders. And we're trying some things different. Battle started a school within a school program. This is where our scholars don't go to regular classes. They go to school, but they stay in a pod and they separate them from the remainder of the school. And it has worked well. They did a presentation at our last board meeting, and some of them told you, I was a pill. You know, I would cut up, and now because they're in that program, they're more focused and so on. So we're looking at ways to do things like that more so that our scholars don't necessarily have to be outside. Because you and I know when a scholar is out at home or out there, they get into mischief. And if they don't get an education, they get into even more mischief, and we have to stop that. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Kathy Jensen in the comments, she wrote, the metrics are complex and not easily understood, the metrics that you were just going through in your slides. Are you aware of any newspaper or TV station stories that did an accurate job reporting on our CPS status? Were there any articles, I guess, that you liked or felt were fair and just? I'm going to put words in her mouth. I think that's what.
Okay. Yes, there was some that was done by Roger from the I believe the Tribune that I know of that did do us some justice on there. But for the most part, I know this was a lot of data to absorb in one time. And I'll be honest, if someone wants to have a more intimate look at it, I will set up some time to look at the data more intimately and have questions. Always not enough time to get everything, and just gives you an overall. But if there's another time I need to set up a meeting, I will love to do that myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe she was just wanting to have something that she could refer friends to, be like, here's a real fair and just, not just going for that clickbaity headline, oh my Lord, 17%, yes. Something that was a little more fair and balanced and informative, and not just going for those knee-jerk.
I will work in my communications department to see if there's something available, and we'll send that out to
She said yes, because there was a lot of misinformation people share on social media. She just added in the chat.
And so this session is free and open to the public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That she could counter with a link to that article when she saw that, if she had it. Pam, your hand's up. You want to go next?
Yes, changing the subject again. Has anyone else applied to become part of the school board besides Mr. Potter yet?
Oh, no, I don't know who has applied, to be honest with you, because that's a board function, and I try to stay out of that. Okay. I know applications are open now up until the end of May, and then in June, the school board would convene their interview in open session so everyone can see, and then they will make a selection based upon that. But no, I have not heard of anyone else.
Maybe Paul Harper knows.
Yeah, I noticed that Paul, he may be eating his lunch or who knows what, but he might, if he hears us calling his name, he might weigh in and just say, I mean, it's a pretty, you don't have to have a number or anything. Paul, do you have a sense that at least one other person other than Potter, there are more applications?
I can tell you that I have fielded several inquiries about it, but I have purposefully not asked Suzette who has applied yet, because I'll be honest with you, I don't want to know until everything's in. Mm-hmm. But I have fielded many people saying, I'm considering it, where do I go?
Okay,
so
good.
I would hope that we're going to get at least a pretty good field. And then, as Dr. Yearwood said, on June 7th, we are going to be doing interviews. And then at the end of that, at that meeting, however long it goes, we will be discussing in open session who we are going to be voting for, and then we will hold a vote and determine who the next person is.
Great.
Very good.
Thanks for weighing in. We want to be respectful of Dr. Yearwood's time. It is a little past 1 o'clock. If anybody has one more burning question, we could probably sneak that in. Otherwise, I'm looking and I don't see any hands. You have one second to weigh in. I want to thank you for your time. This has been really great. Really appreciate you spending the time with us. Also, we did record this and we will post it on our website. So this information will continue to be disseminated in the community. And then all of us now can be ambassadors for CPS now that we're armed with good information and facts. As Kathy was asking, when you hear people spreading rumors and things or going for those clickbaity kinds of headlines. I'm a daughter of a retired public school teacher. This is dear to my heart, right? Public school is really important. It's a benchmark of democracy. It's something that is really important, and it does take a community to support it. So thank you again for coming, for kind of showing us kind of the facts of the scores that we're hearing about. I mean, that was really great to see those slides and have you explain how those scores came about, how they're probably going to be why they're radically different from last year, how they're probably going to be even better next year, just due to in the one case, just not getting the information in time. but that's solved. And so it's immediately going to be better next year. Sue, yes, I see.
I just have one little quick thing.
Sure.
I think there are legitimately some parents that probably have a hard time because of carrying multiple jobs or being a single parent. And maybe there needs to be somehow by school, people that volunteer to help get those kids to school, to get them out of the house and to school.
And we have that. We have homeschool communicators that's a part of what they do. They help to transport scholars to and from school, and they're not in every school, but they're in most of our schools, and they can also move from school to school. So we do have those homeschool communicators that will do that as long as they know about it. They take food to the homes, they take clothing, they find resources for those families in need, and they're employed by the school district, but they also transport scholars that need it. So that's good.
In some cases, maybe even some of the other parents would be willing to help out.
Right, neighbors or carpooling, or because sometimes you have to get them out of bed and get them dressed and then get them to school. It's not just the transportation; it's the whole process. And if the mom is already at her nursing shift and the kid oversleeps, there you are. Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah.